So it's wonderful feedback for them. I'm just going to give you one other one which has come up very well in these trials, which have been done over the past sort of 15, 20 years, and most people don't know about them. The government's not paid a great deal of attention to them, with the exception of Black and Williams's work. It's not, it's not been very influential. But spoof assessment is a great way of getting formative assessment going well. Here, the student is marking a piece of work themselves, or in pairs, in threes. You could get groups of 3 students to mark one piece of work if you like. But here, you give them the piece of work, and everybody in the class has got the same piece of work. One fun way of doing it, you don't have to do it like this. What you could do is just give them one piece of work and say, mark that. What do you think of it? And the students work in 2s or 3s, and they say, well, it's not a bad evaluation, but, really the person ought to have said about the negatives as well as the positives, or whatever, And you have a good class discussion about what's good about this, what's not so good. But here, one trick way of doing this, which is quite good fun early on in a course, is you give students 2 pieces of work, and one of them looks good, but it's bad, and one looks bad, but it's good. But you don't tell them that. You just say, here's 2 pieces of work, what do you think of these 2? So they look at Jane's, there it is, and it's one paragraph, Korea font, not very attractive really, yeah? But then they look at Joe's, and they say, look, 3 pages here, and look at all this technical words, He's downloaded pictures from the internet, fantastic. And it's in a purple plastic document wallet. This is a distinction, there's no question, So you give them these 2 pieces of work, and then you say, okay, give us your grades. And they say, well, we reckon a pass and a distinction. And you say, very good, you're absolutely spot on, only you got them the wrong way round. And their eyes widen, their jaws drop. They are incredulous that any student who hands something in a purple plastic document wallet could ever possibly get less than a distinction. And they look at Jane's work and they say, well, what the bloody hell's she done? And what's Joe done wrong? And you look at it a bit more closely, and you give them a homework to find out what it is that Joe did wrong and what it was that Jane did right. And they come back and they said, oh, we've cracked it. Jane's answered the question. Yeah? And Joe didn't actually bother with that. There's a lot of guff there, but actually doesn't answer the question. You say, spot on. So, and what we're doing here is we're showing them the goalposts. Yeah? This is where to score. Yeah? We're making it clear to them what the criteria are for a good piece of work, for a bad piece of work. And that is not self-evident. Even if you give them assessment criteria, they have trouble interpreting those to mean, what does that mean? What does it mean to justify your design, they say to you. What does that actually mean in practice? Well, in practice, here's a piece of work that justifies a design. Look how they did it. Maybe if you can learn from that, you'll be able to do the similar work yourself. Okay. We're looking at formative assessment, or assessment for learning, if you like. I call it formative assessment because Black and William have both feel that term's been rather corrupted by government initiatives in England. So they've gone back to using that terminology. I'm looking at page 20 now, looking at a method called learning loops. And I'm going to ask you whether you could make use of this method, okay? This is quite a laborious method in a way, and I wouldn't suggest you do this with every piece of work. But it's got a lot of power, and it's another way of getting the students to actually act on the feedback. Because you remember we said, that loopy thing we got on page 1, the sort of feedback loop. We've got to get the students to actually change their constructs as a consequence of your comments and your consequence of your feedback. It's no good just writing comments on a piece of paper if they don't read them and act on them. So how do we get them to act on feedback? So here's one way of doing this. You give them some assessment proformas, and there are a whole string of these in your pack. From about page 22, is it, onwards? Page 20 onwards, there's a whole string of them. You can download these free from my website, and but I've just chosen one here that happens to be probably level 3 or level 4 essay, because most of us have written an essay in our past sometime or other, if only when we were teacher training. So we're familiar with this context. But this method works with practicals. It works with students with learning difficulties. You'll use it in a very different way. But the idea, the principle behind it, you can adapt to any teaching situation. And what happens is this. You give students very clear criteria for what is a good piece of work. Yeah? is clear to you, maybe not so clear to them. But, you know, there are clear criteria there. The student now is about to start their second essay, and they've got a target from the first one. And I'll explain how that target came in a moment. So what's going to happen is the student here is starting a second essay, having done the first one, from which the teacher is giving them a target. So let's say one particular student wasn't very good at giving evidence for their points of view. They said, I think this, but they didn't say why. They didn't justify their position. Yeah? And the teacher says, no, you know, you need to get better at that. That's your target for the next essay. So along comes the next essay. And the student, not the teacher, the student writes the target in a special little couple of boxes. And that's all you need here, actually. Criterion boxes. That's all. 2 boxes and the criteria, you're away. Yeah? And there's a little box at the top, and it says, what's your target? And the student has forgotten, of course. Looks back at the first essay. Oh, yeah, I wasn't very good at giving my evidence. Wasn't very good at giving evidence from my point of view. OK, I'll write that in the box. And then the student does the second piece of work. It's very similar to the first piece of work. It's an essay, totally different topic, though. Yeah? So the student now is doing the work, but they're bearing in mind, got to give evidence, yeah? Got to give evidence. They self-assess on the assessment pro forma, and when they've finished self-assessing, they hand the work in to you, the teacher, and you look at it, and you notice, oh, look, here's Alison, and she's trying to improve her evidence for her points of view. Of course, every student will have a different target here, so it's perfect differentiation. Each individual student has had an individual weakness diagnosed, and it's been handed back to them as a target to improve on their next piece of work. So you say, oh, here's Alison, and she's trying to improve her points of view. And you read the work, and you say, well, it's better than last time. You know, this is a definite improvement. And you give them, I mean, ideally, a medal and a mission. Yeah? You did very well giving evidence for the more numeric aspects of this assignment. But if you look at paragraph 4, you could have given more references there or whatever. Yeah? So you give them a medal and a mission. So next time, remembering forward-looking and positive, next time, more references. Or whatever. The teacher, now assesses the work and writes comments, medals and missions ideally, against the work, and sets a new target. It might be the same one again, because many of these targets are skills. They take a lot of patience and time and practice to get skilled up, but it might be a completely different one. Maybe now you want the student not to concentrate on evidence for their points of view. Maybe you want a better summary or something like that at the end of the essay or whatever it would be. Anyway, that target now appears on assignment 3. We've used assignment 2 to discover a weakness which we've set as a target for assignment 3. And in the same way, we used assignment 1 to discover a weakness that we used in assignment 2, and so on. And this could work with practical work, could work with academic work, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, students with learning difficulties, entry level, wherever you are, there's a place to use this. And there's a whole lot of assessment pro formas on my website you can download that I've stolen from other teachers, where they make use of something like this sort of process. And it's Bill, isn't it? It's find faults, fix, and follow up. Yeah? What's wrong with the student's work? They need to improve this X. Here you are, here's your target. Student tries to improve X. You give feedback. How much has X improved, and then you set another target, and so on. So every student now has got their own individualized target for their work. The problem with this method is it's incredibly time-consuming if you overdo it. Don't do it for every piece of work. What some teachers do is they diagnose a target which is used for a term or a half-term, and then they diagnose a new one, and so on. The research is in your favor if you do this occasionally. There seems to be a diminishing return. The return is very large. It's another one of these very exceptional teaching methodologies which seems to improve students' performance enormously. And it's yet another one of those ones that goes around that little cycle on page 1. Yeah, it's a sort of the feedback cycle. Yeah. Yet again, we're saying, you're good at this, you're not so good at that, fix it. But it makes them fix it. It makes them actually act on it. But interestingly, if you just do it occasionally, it seems to have as much effect as if you do it all the time. So use it occasionally, because it is time-consuming, though mainly time-consuming for the student. You don't need to necessarily keep a record if you don't think it's appropriate or necessary. about which student's working towards which target. That should come out in the wash. When they hand it in, it should be there for you. You might want to keep a record for your own reasons, but that's up to you. From the student's point of view, the learning point of view, it's, you know, it'll work without you having it in your mark book necessarily. Yeah? Okay, over to you. Could you make use of that methodology? Could you adapt it to your own teaching situation? Could you scale it down and make it easier to use? Over to you, just give you a minute. The basic principle is use the last piece of work to try and get the student to improve the next bit. Yeah? We're finding faults and then getting the student to fix it. 1 minute to discuss. Could you make use of that?